If you have ever found a beautiful little stone while walking through nature, you have probably wondered if it might be worth something. And in that situation, there are really two possibilities. The first is that you picked up an ordinary rock. The second is that you almost ignored something much more interesting. That is the problem with searching for gemstones in nature. There may be hundreds of stones around you, but how do you know which ones deserve your attention? Here on the channel, we have already talked about different types of valuable material that people can find outdoors. Some of them can look surprisingly ordinary before they are identified, and that is exactly why beginners miss them. So today I want to show you 5 stones that can be found in nature and that are often overlooked because people do not know what quality to look for. We are talking about opal, jasper, agate, chalcedony, and quartz. Now, do not make the mistake of thinking that every piece of one of these stones will be expensive. It will not. The real advantage of many semi-precious stones is not only the value of one piece, it is also the fact that when you find one, you may find several pieces in the same area. That is very different from searching for an extremely rare gemstone and hoping to find one exceptional crystal. And this is why even relatively inexpensive rough material can become interesting when the quality is good and enough of it is present. But before you go outside looking for these stones, you need to understand something very important. The name of the stone does not determine the value by itself. The quality does. And if you do not understand that, you may keep the wrong stones and throw away the good ones. Let us use emerald as a simple example. 2 stones can both be real emerald. One may have an obvious green color but look dull, opaque, and full of visible internal imperfections. The other may have stronger green color and much better transparency. They are both emerald, but they will not be treated the same way. The Spanish source explains that several technical factors are used when evaluating gemstones, including color, clarity, cut, and carat weight. And for the kind of stones we are talking about today, color is one of the first things you should pay attention to. Look at the strength of the color. Is it vivid? Is it weak? Is the color fairly even, or does it disappear in large areas? Does the stone look better when it is wet? Then look at clarity. Clarity is connected to what you can see inside the material. Some stones contain fractures, others contain trapped minerals or other inclusions. With some gemstones, heavy fracturing reduces the quality, but inclusions are not always bad. In quartz, for example, certain internal features can create patterns that make one specimen different from another. And with jasper or agate, you are often not looking for transparency at all. You are looking for pattern. This is why you should never use one rule for every stone. A very clear quartz may be attractive. A completely opaque jasper can also be attractive for a completely different reason. Now, there are also a few simple things you can do in the field. Look at the stone against the light. Wet the surface. Check whether the color becomes stronger. Compare the weight with another stone of similar size. Look carefully at the texture, and if you have a small flashlight or magnifying lens, use it. The Spanish source even mentions a simple hardness check using common glass. If a stone scratches glass, that suggests a hardness of at least around 6 on the Mohs scale. But that still does not identify the stone by itself. That is the important part. These tests help you decide whether a stone deserves more attention. They do not replace proper identification. Now that you understand that, let us start with the first stone, opal. Opal is one of the most interesting stones you can find because it can look completely different depending on the quality of the material. Some opal is pale and almost ordinary. Some is orange. Some is blue, green, yellow, purple, or nearly transparent. And then there are pieces that show the famous play of color. When you move the stone under light, different colors appear from different angles. That effect comes from the internal structure of the opal. Opal is mainly hydrated silica, and that silica-rich groundwater can move through cracks in sedimentary or volcanic rock. As water is lost over time, silica remains behind. Under the right internal arrangement, the material can diffract light and create the play of color people associate with precious opal. There are several kinds of opal mentioned in the source. Fire opal is known for orange to bright red body color. Precious or noble opal can show strong internal play of color. And black opal is especially famous because the dark body color creates strong contrast with the flashes of color. The Spanish version even notes that a high-quality black opal can exceed many diamonds of the same carat weight in value. But remember, most opal you find is not going to look like a top-quality black opal. A lot of natural opal has little or no play of color. That does not mean it has no use. Common opal can still be used as ornamental or collectible material. So how do you recognize something that may be worth keeping? First, look at the surface under light. Move the stone slowly. If flashes appear and change with the angle, that is a very important clue. Second, check the translucency. Third, look at the texture. The source describes opal as relatively light compared with some other stones, with a smooth surface that can feel almost plastic-like. And it can occur in many different colors. Another reason opal is important for amateur collectors is that you do not always need a deep mine to encounter it. The source points out that in some regions, opal-bearing material can occur in exposed volcanic deposits or close enough to the surface that erosion makes pieces accessible. Australia, Ethiopia, and Mexico are specifically mentioned as major producing countries, while the source also refers to occurrences in the United States. This is why a person who knows what to look for may actually encounter opal while exploring the right area. And there is another reason to pay attention. The English source gives a rough commercial range of about $20 to $5,000 per kilogram for some semi-precious opal material in rough condition, depending on quality. That is a huge range, and it shows exactly why quality matters. 2 kilograms of opal are not automatically worth the same thing. Color, transparency, and visual effect make the difference. Now, opal depends heavily on light. The next stone depends much more on pattern. Jasper. Jasper is one of those stones that many people have probably already seen without knowing what it was. It is commonly recognized as a red or brown stone, but that is only a small part of the story. Jasper belongs to the broad chalcedony family and is a microcrystalline variety of quartz. The Spanish source describes it as forming from silica in sedimentary or volcanic rock, often with iron oxides that produce common red, brown, and yellow colors. But jasper can also appear in green, dark colors, and multicolored patterns. And this is where it becomes interesting. With jasper, the pattern may be more important than transparency. Some varieties have become well known because of their appearance. Picture jasper can contain patterns that resemble landscapes. Dalmatian jasper is described as pale material with dark spots. Dragon blood jasper from Australia combines strong green with red markings. And mookaite, also associated with Australia in the source, can combine red, yellow, and cream in the same material. Now, if you find jasper outdoors, what should you look for? Do not just look for red. Look for strong contrast. Look for unusual designs. Look for several colors occurring together. Look for lines, patches, and natural patterns that become stronger when the stone is wet. The sharper and more visually interesting the natural pattern is, the more attention it may receive from collectors and people using jasper for ornamental work. A rough jasper can look fairly ordinary, but once it is cut into a cabochon or simply polished, the pattern can become much clearer. Some pieces can resemble trees, rivers, or natural landscapes. And this is why you should not judge jasper only from one dry surface. Wet it. Look at the pattern. Look at different sides. The source also mentions jasper deposits in parts of the United States, including Oregon, Arizona, and California, especially in areas connected with old volcanic formations. Dry riverbeds and eroded slopes are specifically mentioned as places where jasper can occur mixed with quartz and agate. There is also a practical clue. Jasper tends to be relatively dense, and pieces that have been naturally worked by water can develop smoother surfaces. The English source gives a rough price range of around $10 to $250 per kilogram for jasper in rough form, depending on the material. Again, that does not mean every red rock is worth money. It means that if you find jasper with strong color and a very unusual pattern, it deserves a closer look. And if you find jasper in a river or eroded area, look around carefully, because another stone commonly mentioned in the same environments is agate. Agate is probably one of the easiest stones on this list to understand once you know what to look for. The most important clue is the pattern. Bands, lines, layers, sometimes concentric designs. These patterns can be extremely obvious in polished agate, but in rough material they may be much harder to see. That is why many people ignore agates in rivers. They see a rounded brown or gray stone and assume it is ordinary. But water can naturally polish part of the surface. And if you look carefully, you may see a band running around the edge. That is when you should stop and check the stone more closely. The English source specifically says that these bands or stripes are one of the easiest characteristics to use when recognizing agate. It also describes rivers as a very common place to find them. Now, not every agate will be expensive. This is where selection becomes important. Look for stronger color. Look for clear banding. Look for attractive internal designs. Look for unusual contrast. The more distinctive the pattern, the more interesting the piece may become after polishing. And polishing can make a huge difference with agate. A rough nodule may show almost nothing on the outside. Then it is cut open and the internal pattern becomes visible. This is one reason agate is so popular for decorative pieces, jewelry, and collections. The original source says that many agates sold on the market are inexpensive. But some unusual pieces, after polishing, can exceed $1,000. That does not mean you should cut every agate you find. If the stone already has an interesting natural shape or a visible pattern, it may be worth examining first. But if you are searching in rivers, agate is definitely one of the stones you should learn to recognize. Look at the edges. Look for bands. Wet the stone. And if you find one, keep searching the area. The source repeatedly emphasizes that semi-precious materials may occur in quantity. Finding one piece may mean there are others nearby. And now we come to a stone that can be even easier to ignore because many pieces look gray or brown at first. Chalcedony. Chalcedony is one of those stones that can look completely ordinary until you know what to check. A lot of natural chalcedony occurs in brownish or grayish tones, and if that is all you see, you may walk past it. But the source points out that chalcedony can occur in many colors: blue, green, purple, pink, and other shades. The Spanish version describes chalcedony as a cryptocrystalline quartz variety formed from microscopic layers of silica deposited in fractures in volcanic or sedimentary rock. It often appears as veins or rounded nodules and may occur together with agate and jasper. One of the useful characteristics is the luster. The source describes chalcedony as having a smooth, somewhat silky or waxy appearance that helps distinguish it from more typical quartz. And this is where a flashlight can help. If you find a smooth gray or brown stone, especially in an area where other silica-rich stones are present, hold a light behind a thin edge. Some chalcedony becomes slightly translucent around the edges. When the stone is wet, the internal color may also become easier to see. The source specifically mentions wet river fragments, whose edges reveal slight translucency and hidden internal color. And it says that a simple flashlight can be very useful in separating interesting chalcedony-like material from ordinary stone. There are also several varieties mentioned. Blue lace agate is described as having delicate pale blue bands. Chrysoprase is associated with strong green color caused by nickel. Purple chalcedony is described as rare and sought after. Pink chalcedony is also mentioned as having a softer, milkier appearance. Now, the brighter colors are harder to find. Most people are not going to walk outside and immediately find beautiful purple chalcedony, but that is why knowing the ordinary material matters. If you know what common chalcedony looks like, you have a better chance of recognizing an unusual piece. And there is another useful clue. The source says chalcedony often occurs in regions where quartz, agate, and jasper are also present. So if you have already found one of those silica-rich materials, look carefully at the surrounding stones. The English source gives a broad commercial range of roughly $20 to more than $1,000 per kilogram for some chalcedony material, depending heavily on quality. Again, color and appearance make the difference. A dull gray piece and an attractive translucent blue piece are not going to be treated the same way. And now we come to the stone that you are probably most likely to encounter: quartz. Quartz is everywhere. And because it is so common, Many people stop paying attention to it, but that is a mistake. I am not talking only about the clear quartz crystals people usually imagine. I am talking about the larger quartz family. There are many different types and appearances. And if you are searching in nature, especially around rivers, quartz is one of the materials you are very likely to encounter. The source gives a simple rule. Look for material that is translucent and has relatively few fractures, regardless of color. That does not mean every cloudy piece is worthless. But if you find quartz with stronger transparency, attractive color, and relatively clean material, pay attention. Then look inside. Quartz can contain inclusions, and inclusions are where many interesting specimens begin. You may see internal minerals, small structures, clouds, different patterns. The source explains that these internal features can make pieces unique and can increase interest for jewelry or collecting when the effect is visually attractive. So if you find quartz, do not only ask, "Is this quartz?" Ask, "What kind of quartz specimen is this?" Look at the clarity, look at the color, look at the fractures, look at the inclusions, and compare several pieces from the same area. That comparison is useful because it helps you understand what is normal there. If most of the quartz is cloudy and fractured and one piece is unusually clear, that piece deserves more attention. If most pieces are colorless and one has unusual color or inclusions, check it carefully. And this is one of the biggest advantages of looking for common semi-precious material. You get practice. You begin to see differences that someone with no experience would miss. Now, suppose you actually find something unusual. What should you do next? That is where many beginners make the biggest mistake. Imagine that you are walking beside a river and you find a stone that looks different. It has an unusual color. It feels heavier than you expected. One edge is translucent. Maybe there are bands. Maybe the surface has a waxy look. Maybe you see an inclusion inside. At that moment, do not make your decision based only on excitement. One of the most common beginner mistakes is trusting only the surface appearance or the emotion of the moment. That is exactly when mistakes happen. Someone sees green and decides it must be emerald. Someone sees a transparent crystal and assumes it is expensive. Someone sells a strange stone cheaply because they do not know what it is. So slow down. Compare the stone with reference material. Look at the color. Look at the weight. Look at the luster. Look at the texture. Use a small magnifying lens. Use a flashlight. The source specifically recommends these simple tools because they can help you avoid throwing away something unusual. And if you still do not know what you found, ask someone with experience, a geologist, a prospector, a gemologist, or a collector who knows the material from that region, because finding the stone is only half the process. The other half is knowing what to do with it. Without knowledge, you can sell something too cheaply. You can damage it by cutting it too early. Or you can waste time believing an ordinary rock is something rare. But with practice, your eye becomes better. You begin to notice the difference between strong color and weak color, between ordinary jasper and jasper with a unique pattern, between plain river rock and agate banding, between dull chalcedony and material that glows under light, between common quartz and a specimen with interesting clarity or inclusions. And remember the other advantage we talked about at the beginning. Semi-precious stones can occur in quantity. You may not find one stone worth a fortune, but if you find an area with good quality material, several smaller pieces together may still have commercial value. That is why the most important goal should not be to walk outside expecting to become rich. It should be to learn what the stones in your own region actually look like. The better you become at that, the less likely you are to overlook something interesting. And there is one more stone that deserves special attention. It has already changed the lives of lucky finders. It can be difficult for beginners to recognize correctly. And in rough form, it may look much more ordinary than people expect. That stone is jade. In the next video, we are going to look at how rough jade can be recognized, what characteristics you should pay attention to, and why some pieces can be far more valuable than they appear. So if you enjoy searching for stones in rivers, mountains, or rural areas, do not miss that one. Because sometimes the difference between an ordinary rock and an important discovery is simply knowing what you are looking at.